there's a David Smith.
Howdy.
Hello. Yeah, because there's many folks that can't make it.
Oh, David, how are you?
There's
Good.
about 25 people that that had clicked to attend. They've registered, but they're
Beside
not
Taylor.
here. So there's every month we're getting 50,
There's a
60
Taylor. I see a
that are
Taylor.
signing up.
No.
Ronald.
I don't think you.
Hi, Ron.
Hi.
Hi,
Bill.
We're here.
All right. Might be good to ask. All right. Okay, so we'll get started now. And if there's chatter in the background or something's falling or whatever, I'll just mute your mic for you in case you forget. And so you might have to unmute it if you want to talk again. But welcome everybody. This is exciting. We have 26 people that have joined, which is the most we've ever had. And I think there's over 400 views now on your video, George. And some of the other ones that we've done, like some of our first ones now have up to 600 views. So this series is really being well received by members, and it's wonderful. And we're having lots of members volunteer to make videos themselves. So Rod is here joining us, and he's going to go in December. They've produced a wonderful video. So Rod, is Charlie your family? I forget.
He's my son.
Son. Okay, yeah. So Charlie's produced a fantastic video for Rod, and I helped to produce this one. So it's a wonderful group effort. So that's great. Thanks for everyone for being here, and for the folks that aren't, which are close to 20. They'll get the recording. So that's
only
awesome.
about 6 of us then. They're on.
No, that you're only seeing 6, but if you look at the top,
She's here.
there's and you kind of scroll through, there's actually 26 people attending. So
That's great.
Yeah, it's
Hi,
great.
George.
That's really good.
Who's that saying hi?
Oh, go
Me,
on.
Joanne Watson.
Hi, Joanne.
Oh,
Let's
All
see,
of George's
Joanne.
friends are here.
And we're members.
okay.
No, it's good. I think this group is rowdy enough to I won't have to randomly ask people to ask questions. I think it's rowdy enough to keep itself going for the next 45 minutes at the very least.
The
So
microphone's off.
so
I think so.
that's awesome. So George, why don't you kick us off and just remind us about some of there's hundreds of things, thousands of things you've been up to over the past 40 or 50 years, is it, of having your property. So maybe just remind us of some of the key things that you're interested in and where you're located, just to remind people and spur some questions. And while you're doing that, the folks that have joined us, if you can think of some questions to ask, and it can be anything from, how George and Ali and how they're managing the, dog strangling vine, and what they're witnessing with the LDD moth, or how they long ago transitioned from farmland
Hi,
to
Dave.
woodland. So have a think about some questions while George is talking, and then we'll have the whole time to just chat and ask questions, and it'll be great. And it's kind of organic. It just takes a mind of its own, and that's great. And I'll take notes. So if there's some resources that people have mentioned, I'll note it and I'll send it out to the group after.
Okay.
So-
Great.
So here we go then. I'm George, and I'd like to welcome you all to this little talk session. Ali happens to send her regrets that she had other commitments and she couldn't be here tonight. So I'll have to do most of the talking by the looks of things. We live in Castleton, Northumberland County. We bought the farm here back in 1969, so we've been with now 52 years. The farm was bought as a working farm. We used to grow tobacco here, but tobacco has all left us pretty well, so we had to turn the farm into general crops. And then basically, I got really interested into the woodlot after we left the tobacco and we slowed down a little bit. I spent more time in the woodlot. Shortly after we bought it, I had it evaluated once by some foresters, and we walked through it. And the woodlot had been very heavily cut, obviously 10, 20 years before that, was still quite open. We had a lot of poplar growing in there. And so I was advised there's really nothing we can do in order to improve it at this point. You just leave the woodlot alone, and then it'll all grow up together. And hopefully you get some nice trees out of it. If you keep it too open, trees become very limby and they're not very good quality. A lot of the trees at that time were poplar. We had red oak, we had cherry, and we had quite a few white pine, and they've all come along very nicely. So it was about 20 years after that, about 1997, I believe it was, that we did an improvement cut. And I hooked up at the pulp mill in Trenton, and they looked after it, and they cut out a lot of the poplar at that point, and that all went in for pulpwood. And at the same time, when they did all that, of course, they had to come up and put some logging trails in it so that they had access to the woods. So when they were all done, I got looking at it one time. I said, well, wouldn't it be nice if I maybe cut those logging trails and kind of keep them maintained, so that'll always give me access to the woods. And even we use them now for walking trails. So that's been a very valuable asset, I feel, to the woodlot, that we had the trails, because it certainly gives you access, you know what's going on, and you can see it and enjoy the woodlot in that respect. So that was done back in 1997. In the meantime, we had, let me see, when I bought the farm, we had about a good 40 acres of woodland, but there was quite a few marginal areas on the farm with light sandy knolls and stuff like that. And I started to plant those areas with other trees. And over time, I added another 20 acres of trees to the farm. So we planted a lot of trees. We started out with planting red pine, and we found that the red pine wasn't really that vigorous here. And I soon found out that my pH in the land is a little too high, and red pine doesn't really like that. So it took a while before they actually established themselves. But nevertheless, they are here now, and they make some very nice lumber. So we did that. We planted a lot of white pine and spruce, and that kind of filled in a lot of the areas that were sort of not producing very well on the farm. So that has certainly helped. And so we planted that, and then we also started to harvest a little bit. We put in a wood stove in the front room, and so every year I had to go cut my firewood, and we did that. And I'm still doing that now. So that's one of the things that we harvest for ourselves. I have done a couple of times where we cut some saw logs down and got a sawmill in, and I got a nice little stash of lumber out for our own use. So that's been good. We have sold some logs, but I still kind of feel that we're not getting paid well enough for the good lumber that we do have. And so I kind of decided I'm not going to sell any more logs, but just let them grow. And they'll be there for the next generation. So, so much for that. And so in the meantime, I'm looking at the woodlot and maintaining it. And basically what the maintenance consists of is I try to cut out some of the invasive species. I'm battling some buckthorn. They are coming in, and once you get them, the birds will carry the little seeds all over the place. And so I kind of pull them all out if I can. And so I usually spend 1 or 2 days a year on that and cut a lot of them out. Then another thing that we did come in was dog strangling vine. And I must have, I would say, probably about 5 or 6 acres of it that is pretty heavily infested with dog strangling vine. I've tried to spray that before and see if I could eliminate that, but there is absolutely no way that you can, because it's very invasive and it keeps coming on. So I just sometimes spray it off a little bit up along the trails and push it back a little bit and keep it somewhat contained anyway. So we have that. The one nice thing about dog strangling vine is that we used to be infested with poison ivy. And wherever the dog strangling vine is, the poison ivy is all gone. So that's one thing that will do that. But the poison ivy on the other areas, I do spray that back up along the trails as well, so that when you walk the trails, that there is no poison ivy around there. So for the rest, I guess that's more or less what I'm working on with the woods. We have a pond on the property as well, so that's actually part of the woodlot. It's about a 1 acre pond, a spring-fed pond, and that's been stocked with rainbow trout. And the reason why we got that stocked and how we got that going is because I was approached by the Workwoods Community Service Club. They wanted to do a project and have a fishing derby for the kids. And they said, you got such a nice pond here. Could we use this pond for a year and we'll put some fish in it and let the kids come and fish? Well, that happened to be so successful that they said, could we do that again next year? And now we're about 30 years later and we're still doing it, except for the last 2 years, we haven't been able to do that because of the COVID. But it looks like that we're going to start it up again next year, and we'll carry on with that. So in the meantime, the pond is stocked with fish, and you can go up there and see the fish swimming around. You throw a little food in there, and up they come. And so it's an enjoyable thing to have around. And so that's basically. Having had the farm for 52 years and been watching the woods is an ever-changing thing, of course, and so it evolves. And I've seen from a bit of a marginal type of woods, we can now look at the woods and say, hey, this is really coming along very nice. I got a lot of nice trees in there. So there's I got some real nice cherry there, black oak. So it's enjoyable to just watch this evolve and see this. So we, in our retirement year, having it, and we can go out for a little walk and do some forest bathing. It's supposed to be really good for you, and I think.
Oh, you're so
far-
hip. You're so hip,
That's
George.
right. So that's more or less, yeah, where we're at, and what the woodlot can do, and what you can do for the woodlot. So
Thanks, George.
I'll turn it back to Erica, and we'll, if anybody has any
George.
questions. Okay.
That was awesome. That was a great overview because it really touched on a lot of the different, yeah, high five. Thanks, Marilyn. Marilyn's clapping, but we can't hear her.
Right.
Yeah, that was lovely. That was a lovely overview of some of the many things that you guys are doing there, and I had a privilege to go and see for myself, and so there's so many possible topics that we could dig into, and instead of me directing the questions, because I'm not sure of the experience of the folks that are in this group, right? Perhaps you already know the answers to some of the more basic questions that I would have. So I think it would be best if some of the folks that are here tonight, if there's anything that you're particularly interested in, just go ahead and ask. And even if it's not a question, you can at least share maybe some of the topics that you're working on your farm, or if you don't have a farm, just something you're interested in, and that may spur some questions. So if anyone wants to just go ahead and ask or share what's on their mind, that would be lovely.
I have a question. I didn't hear where your location was.
It's in Northumberland County. Castleton is a little village about 10 kilometers north of 401. So it's about in the middle of Northumberland County,
Okay,
northeast of Coburg.
yes, thank you.
Yeah, it's pretty east, eh, John? Or George, sorry.
Bigger
I'm
pardon?
looking at John who's speaking, and then I've got George. Yeah, it's fairly east. Like I'm in Lindsay, and it took a good hour and a little bit east of where I am, kind of Peterborough, Lindsay
Right.
area.
Right. Yeah, but we're a little further south.
And a
So
lot of farming in your community, right?
we actually have a nice climate here. I would think that our heat units are a little bit higher because of Lake Ontario. And of course, we're situated halfway between Lake Ontario and Rice Lake. So it's a nice climate here.
I didn't realize that tobacco grew in that area. I always thought it was farther south.
Yes, it is. Most of the tobacco was grown in southwestern Ontario around Tillsburg and Delheim. But at one time we had 150 farms east of Bowmanville here. So there was quite a district that grew tobacco here. But that's all history.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd comment here. I think George, it's Joe Banbury here, and I'm just down by Brighton, which isn't very far from George. I've walked through his woods in the past, and he's showing some friends of mine through his woods on those neat trails. I do think you're onto something though, George, is you don't get paid very well for logs.
No, that's
And
right.
I do hope that you get an adequate compensation from your forest bathing, because my woodlot situation was one that had been pastured probably for 40 years prior to my ownership in 72. And I heated my house for a good many years on ironwood, in that it had been pretty much a climax forest of maple and ironwood. So I had people comment when I cut the ironwood, "Are you that hard up for pasture that you have to clear a piece of your woods?" And in a matter of a very few years, that whole area with enough light came up to maple. And so far, I'm content with the maple in that it seems to be about the only species that doesn't have an enemy that's going to wipe it right out. I don't know where you stood for white ash, but I could supply at least a large town with all the firewood they could use out of dead ash.
Wow.
And it's going to rot because I'm getting a little old and tired for cutting it.
Were you affected by the gypsy moth, Joe?
Yes, but
They like
gypsy moth isn't bothering me near as much as the emerald ash borer. I think the gypsy moth did bother. I worried a little bit about my walnut plantation, which is another topic. And it seemed to come through the previous gypsy moth episode, relatively healthy. I don't think I lost any trees over it. We do have a little ornamental spruce in the front lawn that looks like he's going to croak over gypsy moth, but I have another twist on this, and George has seen my plantation. Back in '88, I put my kids to work planting walnuts. We planted them in rows 50 feet apart, 35 feet apart in the row, so that every tree has all the space it needs to thrive right to maturity. And then when the trees were very small, we grew crops between the rows, pretty heavy on hay. And now that they're 5 inches, 6 inches in diameter, I run a high tensile wire down each row and pasture cattle on the 50-foot space. And quite frankly, combination, so far, I haven't come up with an ailment that is killing the walnut trees. And I really think it's got much more potential for profit in that, walnut lumber, even though we're probably going to replace all the lumber with that manufactured engineered flooring that we're using all over the place. But walnut lumber is likely to maintain some value. Pine, cedar, most of these things are, boy, you are going to have a hard time getting minimum wage cutting that stuff. But maybe it's enough about me. Would somebody else check in?
I have a question for you, Joe.
Yeah.
Has anybody tried replacing dead ash by seeding walnuts?
Not that I know of. Well, anybody, I guess I'd have to still stick with no. The squirrels are trying hard.
Yep, they sure are.
And when we planted the nuts, I had lots of people ask me, well, how deep did you plant them? Well, I did make a kind of a half-hearted attempt to work up the field. And basically the nuts got planted by, depends. My kids, I think, were, eldest one probably was 11, and they were down from that. So you have probably a 7-year-old using his toe to cover the nuts. after the guy in front had used a undersized shovel to just try and dig a wee hole. And the biggest problem we had with the nuts was we thought we were being smart. We put 2 nuts in each hole in the hopes that the squirrel would only find 1. And unfortunately, the damn squirrels were, I think they're pretty much on vacation there for a year or 2, because we had one hell of a time with doubles. And that wasn't happy. And once that walnut gets started, it don't quit.
Yep.
You've got to pretty near dig the roots out. But
They're a pretty hardy tree.
oh, they are. And they're a fast growing tree, even though, okay, I get people asking me, oh, did the gypsy moths get your walnuts? Because the walnuts are late in the spring coming out with their leaves. So if you want to do any spraying for, say, Roundup, I was able to do that any year I wanted to. And similarly, if we grew corn between those rows, we could spray. Didn't seem to do any harm to the walnuts because they hadn't leafed out yet. And again, they lose their leaves earlier than other trees in the fall. So
Planting walnuts in that fashion that you did, Joe, that has proven quite successful to do what we call intercropping, I guess.
Yeah. Well, I think it's fine in that I'm getting, I've actually read material from Oklahoma, the book that's long out of print, but they had done a experiment where they had, I think, 20 acres of the same pasture, the same soil type, but no trees. The other 20 acres had, I think, was on a 40 by 40 foot grid. They planted walnuts. And they found that they got better gain on weight for steers on pasture where the trees were, because they simply ate till they were full, and there was shade right there beside them when they wanted to lay down through their cud. And there wasn't any wasted exercise heading for a shade tree to lay down, which would seem to be the only explanation they had. But
Joe, did you ever have problems with the walnuts bunging up the machine while you're trying to harvest the?
Well, no, we combined oats, buckwheat. No, we didn't. The walnuts. Well, maybe we ran our haybine a little higher off the ground than some people are, but frankly, I think I got lots of weird ideas, but I really think that a lot of people run their haybines way too close to the ground and wonder why they don't get a second cut. The plant does need a little bit of leaf surface to get growing.
It's quite interesting because there seems to be this this major difference between woodland owners and farmers, and it's really fascinating.
I'm a weirdo that doesn't know which department I should be in.
Exactly, and I don't see the difference in terms of, really there is no difference. But we've broken them down into these silos, and I think it's such a fascinating case study for people like you guys here that see that it's possible to combine the two on the same piece of land.
Well, yeah, but okay. George alluded to how dog strangling vine had crowded out the poison ivy. I have several neighbors who actually built houses in what had been a reforestation project, but it was that wonderful Scotch pine, so they're not even looking forward to harvesting a single log that would be worth sawing. But they said they can't use their yard. They got 3 acres or something. They can't use it because of poison ivy. And I said, well, you simply need to rent a couple of my cows, because if a cow can get close to it, they'll kill poison ivy. We used to have, when my Crammy farm was owned by a dairy farmer who basically grew corn and alfalfa for his dairy cows, the poison ivy was world class. And the only place you'll be able to find any poison ivy on my property is some corner where the cows can't get at it. Now, the trouble is I have cows and that ties you down.
Right.
This is fascinating. I think you guys are you're gonna have to have a whole separate section, and we'll advertise it to the
I'm game.
the agriculture folks. You gotta come up with some fun name that won't put them off, and
Well, we'll find a way to put them off.
yeah, I'm sure. And it's interesting because, like, you know, Paul Robertson, the president of the OWA, is also doing both, and he sees both sides. And the people that are doing both, they see that they work hand in hand. So,
Well, I haven't been very active lately, but there was a time, well, when my boys were at home, we went to some woodlot meetings. My biggest complaint with most people's woodlot is there are not enough stumps. They love admiring a few nice big trees, but they don't have a growth rate that's, you know, gonna ever, you know, you gotta have your grandfather start looking after it in order to ever get a financial reward. Even though there's studies, University of Guelph did some work on several places in Ontario where people reckoned that they made just about as much out of their woods on an acre basis as they did growing corn and soybeans. Now, I'm only really familiar with one of those situations, and those lads were hairy hounds for selling firewood in urban area that was close to them. And their farm is now a gravel pit. So maybe their corn and soybean yields weren't quite what they might have been.
does anyone else have success combating dog strangling vine or?
I would like to make some comments since we were talking about walnut. I know Joe's situation and how he did it, and I did it different. And mine, I've run into a lot of trouble, and Joe has got some really nice walnut trees there, so that intercropping is really good. I planted 2 rows of walnuts right in the plantation that I had planted with white pine and spruce. And by now, I think the walnuts have killed about 2 acres of spruce and white pine because of the juggalo. So, and I'm still watching and see what other trees might grow compatible with walnuts, but I haven't found any yet. So I'm not too sure what to plant that back into. So if anybody has suggestions, I'm all ears to hear about that.
I was wondering if that had something to do with your soil, because we have walnuts growing around here, and they don't seem to kill stuff off a whole lot.
Okay.
Where's here?
Just south of Portland. It's on a drumlin. There are a lot of hardheads and glacial till, and the garden is fairly compatible with the walnuts growing in it.
Oh boy, you know, that's unusual. I can tell you, when I was working in southwestern Ontario and this juggler's poisoning, the pretty good tomato grower had half dozen patches in his field that looked like maybe I don't know, flying saucer had landed or something, because there was a circle of dead tomato plants. And finally, they sent me, the fresh hire hotshot in the ag research department, out to figure out what was going on here. I was really scratching my head, walking around in this field. Nothing seemed to make any sense. Then I noticed a bunch of stumps way over in the far side. So I went over there and sure enough, they were all walnut stumps.
And they were a long way from the dead tomatoes?
Oh, well, the roots where the stumps had been
Hmm.
was all dead tomatoes.
Hmm.
At least that's the farmer agreed with me that I said, well, you know, those walnut stumps. And he says, yeah. I said, well, I don't know how long it'll take, but don't worry. I mean, you grow corn or soybeans, I doubt that it'll bother, but tomatoes are extremely sensitive.
My dad found his horses were sensitive, the hoofs, to having walnut leaves around their pastures.
Okay, I don't know about that one.
Well, he heard it from the Amish down in Pennsylvania.
Okay.
And they said your horse won't get past 20 years if it eats walnut leaves. The hoof
Well,
will go.
remember the old story, the lads that came up from Pennsylvania, the one book was on the trail of the black walnut. If they'd have been
Yes.
looking for white pine, they'd have ended up in Northumberland, but they ended up in Waterloo.
Mhm.
And fair enough. I'm on the edge of soil for black walnut. I've got the
And
climate and
where-
plus,
where are you
and-
located, Joe?
right at Brighton. I'm just south of 401, at Brighton.
Okay.
Your dog strangling vine, I have found that the highest rate for brush kill sprayed in June before the fruit gets, too big, will do a pretty fair job. The difficulty is that there's inches thick of seed on the ground, so you have to spray several years in a row but you're getting different plants each year. There's one other thing that'll get dog strangling vine, but I don't quite know how you're going to do it. One year we had a killing frost on the 23rd of May. Down very back of my farm, I've been battling a patch of dog strangling vine out in the pasture field. And son of a gun, I turned the cow, after this frost, I turned the cows out and they gobbled the stuff up. Just about to its demise. So if we can drag a refrigeration unit across your patch and then turn some cattle in, we got a natural.
Combination, yeah.
Yeah, well,
Well, that might be.
somebody
a
else
little
has
tough.
got to do some talking here. I find it too easy.
There's a woman, I believe her name is Kathleen, and she's a professor at U of T of entomology, and she's bred some creature, caterpillar perhaps, that eats the dog strangling vine.
Good for her. But
But
what else does the caterpillar do?
Yeah, good question, right? So
Isn't that the lady at Carleton?
no, it's UFT. Her name is Kathleen. The company I believe is called Silvacon. But I can share the contact for those of you that are interested, and you'd have to contact her directly. She's so booked, so I know that the demand is high. But you could say you've heard about it, and if you're interested in inquiring more, it's best to just speak to her directly. But I'll share it anyway.
There's supposed to be 20 people listening here. Some of them aren't talking.
I got a question for George. Can you hear this question, George?
I sure can.
I know absolutely nothing about trees, but I've been on your wood lot and it's beautiful. I want to know when the fishing derby starts because, I always want to be there when it goes on. So let me know.
Okay, I'll certainly will.
All right.
It looks like it's going to be a go for next year, so we'll start her back up again next year.
It sounds like fun because I'll tell you, the kids really enjoy that derby.
That's a fishing derby. We have that for one weekend on a Saturday and a Sunday. And we usually get between 200 and 250 kids come out with their parents to fish. So it's been really successful, and we're going to try to keep it going.
I could tell the rest of you a lot of nice stories about that, and believe me, the kids really enjoy it. One little quick story, a father and a daughter and a son come in, and they had no idea how to fish or how to set up their fishing rods. And I went over and I helped them and got them started. And the next year I'm on the other side of the pond, and the son, they come in the next year, the son come walking around the pond and says, "Hi, Jim, how are you doing? Thank you for helping me set up my fishing rod last year." Like,
Aw.
Good.
amazing things, yes. It's a great fishing derby.
Yeah, it made you feel pretty good too.
Oh, it sure did, Joe. It did, yes.
It did. Yeah, that kind of feedback.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
no.
I
I like
have
the
a
conversation
question for
about the trees
George.
too, but you know.
Go ahead, John.
Yeah, I have a question for George. Going back to poison ivy, I was wondering what kind of herbicide you used on your poison ivy?
I usually use 2,4-D.
2,4-D?
Yeah,
Okay,
and that seems to work quite well. Works for a little while on dog strangling vine as well, but once dog strangling vine got close to flowering, the leaves are waxy and it doesn't work nearly as well on then anymore. But in the beginning, if
I like brush kill for both.
yeah,
Brush kill will do a better job on creeping Charlie if you have it in your lawn. Don't like it.
oh yes, okay, yeah,
not Roundup. Not
No,
Roundup.
Roundup kills everything that's green. So all you do is make a super seed bed for any weed that's there.
yeah, I find that the same way, Joe. So yeah, I try to avoid Roundup. So, but there's different people who do use Roundup.
well,
Yeah.
Oh,
So-
it's a whole different thing if you got 100 acres that you want to kill weeds in before you plant a crop. That's a different. I still don't like Roundup. Roundup itself might be harmless when it hits the ground, but the things it breaks down into are a lot less than harmless.
Well, it's been with us for a long time, and
Oh yeah,
farmers are still using it. And
oh for sure.
It's been a good herbicide. So, yeah,
But whatever's good gets overused.
that's right. I have another comment on dog strangling vine. I've got areas in the woods where dog strangling vine has been there for about 20 years. And it's amazing how much regeneration there still is with young trees. So like in the beginning, I was always afraid that because dog vine is so thick that it kills out everything and it would not regenerate. But it does seem to be all right. I got some nice white pine, oak trees and stuff like that coming right through.
Well, it sure wouldn't be a whole lot of soil erosion with all that dog strangling vine.
That's, yeah, right. So I don't know if we're obviously very concerned about it, but maybe we're overreacting.
Well, remember purple loosestrife? Everybody had their knickers all knotted up over that stuff, and turned out it was pretty good for honeybees. And then didn't it get a parasite of some sort?
Correct.
A beetle.
Yeah, beetle. So
They were released a mile from our house.
Mother Nature, but nature kind of, with a little help, did the job.
Do people worry about wild grapevine? I've got some that doesn't seem to spread too much.
Well, the wild
You just let it go.
grapevines, I keep brush kill around because I have to spray every now and again with pack sack sprayer for my electric fences. Stupid, grapevines, so just drag them right down to the ground.
Yeah. So, well, that seems to be in certain areas and, yeah, I guess you just have to get right after it and just cut it off and see if you can kill it.
Yeah, I've heard some mixed, in different parts of Ontario, I've heard some foresters concerned about the grapevine and some completely not concerned at all. So it's
Right
interesting.
now,
Oh, then the same forester will start talking about how to feed the birds. What's better than the grapevine?
True.
Sure. So,
But it does get absolutely massive on the inside of the forest. One forester said, oh no, it's not a concern because it really only takes up around the edge where there's a lot of light. But actually there's some, in Hanover area around, what's the closest town? Kind of Orangeville, west of Orangeville. In that area, it's massive and it's taking down these black cherry and
really?
so yeah, they look like trees almost. They're so thick. And so that kind of, I don't know, that discredited the previous advice I had heard. So I don't know.
Sure. Yeah, I would certainly cut them if you, because they do grow. I've found some of them about 4 or 5 inches in diameter. And so they climb right up the tree all right.
yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, I'm
they'll
seeing.
do a number on the tree, yeah.
Oh, sure do. So you don't want too many of those. Oh, yeah.
So I've got a situation where I've got a lot of tamarack and I really need to have that thinned, but I was worried, George, after hearing what you were saying about having people come in, I'm kind of like worried about what I'll end up with and maybe they'll just make a huge mess and
Yeah.
maybe just better to leave it as it is. But
We've
they are
cut-
too close.
We've cut a fair little bit of tamarack in that we do have a chunk of swamp and I don't know, we've used it. We cut 20-foot 2x10s out of tamarack, 20 feet long. And man, can
Really?
you make a nice pole barn if you've got 20-foot span instead of 14? Make a nice shed.
Whoa.
And
But George, Joe, are you cutting it yourself or are you having loggers?
Yeah, my son and I cut it.
I think that's the difference because George had a horrible experience with some loggers, and that seems to be a really common issue. And
Well,
we're
the-
actually putting
the-
together right now a whole little online course. We're developing many little online courses, but the first one I think we're going to focus on how to ensure you don't end up with a bad logger.
Yeah.
So
Well, it's the same story for, people that want to sign a contract with some guy to build them a garage. I can remember talking to a number over the years. I've only had one outside logger and he was a chap that I had quite a long history with. But, the guy that is actually cutting the trees down and his buddy who is doing the skidding, they're paid so much 1,000 to get those things out on the landing. And they're not the least bit interested in how much damage to do. It doesn't make any money for them. And it's a tough one. I got lucky. I've taken up a lot of your time, but I had a barn fire you hardly think that's a lucky thing, but I had borrowed a friend's log skidding winch, and it was mounted on the back of my tractor that got burned up in the barn. Well, I didn't even know it, but my fire insurance had 10% of whatever I had for coverage on machinery was available for borrowed machinery. So after Jerry and I had been to the farm show and talked to the people that made the stupid winch that I had, or I'd borrowed, we had it figured out that $750 would put his winch back in business, and he seemed to be content with that. Then I found out that my insurance would buy him a brand new winch. So I got the old one. And that made all the difference in the world to what my son and I could do for logging. With 150 feet of cable, we could pull stuff out of places that we wouldn't even dream of getting a tractor or even a team of horses if we'd had one. And that was the biggest thing next to burning firewood that for our woods, because it's a lot of work to get that stuff out, but
and I think that's what the benefit of the forestry co-ops are starting up, the one in Kawartha and the one in Huronia, because basically what's happening there is instead of going at this alone, you're with a community, and now all of a sudden together a good logger will look at your property and say, okay, I'll do them all together. And then you have one forester that's been vetted by, everybody. And this forester is going to ensure that a good logger is coming in. So we kind of make sure that everyone's taken care of and people get paid well. But when you try to do it yourself, then it tends,
you have to put up with having it done right.
Yeah, and when you try to find a logger on your own, then it can become more difficult, because now all of a sudden it's more of a risk for that logger to go in there, because it's so much cost to bring the machinery there, and they need to make sure they get their returns. And so if they get to a point where the trees are no good for them, they're just going to turn around and back out, regardless if your forest needs to get thinned or not. They don't care about the health. They're just going to make their money and go, because it's already a small job for them. So it can become quite tricky when you have smaller landowners or smaller properties going at it alone.
We found that the local stewardship council was really helpful in getting us oriented and getting us a logger.
The FSC program, or the
yes, the Leeds Grenville Stewardship Council worked very actively to get our woodlot ready for a plowing match, and so I didn't know anything about it. I just let them tell me what to do, and they picked the logger, and the guy who did the prescription on the wood, he came back to do it for our cut this year, and he got us another great logger. And I don't think anything was written in paper the last time, but everything worked out really well.
And your forest is FSC certified too, right?
Yes.
I think that helps as well. If you become part of a forest certification, then there's an auditing process. And so
we did that last week.
Yeah, there you go. So you can talk to that and what it means to be an FSC certified forest, because that can help to ensure, because the auditor will go in and they'll look at, which trees are damaged, and you have to have a, damage under a certain percent, and they really have to do it a specific way.
If you have any Norway spruces around, don't tell them. Everything has to be native. Everything has to be native.
Is that available to us, Erica?
Yeah, it would be. So I could get Glenn Prevost. He is now in charge of that on behalf of the OWA. So he's a forester, and he works I'm not sure if you guys know, but the Eastern Ontario Model Forest is merging with the Ontario Woodlot Association. And
Oh.
yes, and so the Eastern Ontario Model Forest has for a while has been running this forest certification, the FSC program. And so Glenn has come on board as, you know, the FSC coordinator now on behalf of this collective organization. And so he's the guy to talk to. So I'll make sure I send out his contact with everybody, for everybody who's
George,
interested.
you
I
and
can vouch
looked
for
into-
Glenn.
George and I looked into this several years ago and we couldn't get the model forest people pulled this far west.
That's right.
Yeah, they had their turf and they weren't coming all the way to Brighton and Castleton, which isn't all that far apart.
Yes.
Oh, Glenn will
nice.
come out there. Don't worry.
Well, okay, but you're telling us things have changed there.
Yes.
I'm nowhere near as proud of the appearance of my woods today as I was, say, 20 years ago. When we were making maple syrup and burning firewood, we had it a lot neater and tidier, and defective trees were disappearing because, but I'm not using, I got environmentally sensitive. I'm using geothermal for heat, so woods is suffering.
And interestingly, both Rod and George they've planted butternuts.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm
I,
curious, we haven't talked about that
How
yet.
about-
Maybe you want to touch on,
it's like,
you know,
I,
getting involved in that kind of thing.
sure. I like diversification, and so for that, I like to bring in maybe some different species altogether. Well, I certainly didn't have butternut, and I had a chance of getting about 25 butternuts from Barb Boyson from Peterborough. Planted them, and I think I must have about 10 or 15 of them growing. So that's kind of nice. And I planted them in the right spots because they need to be out in the fence row where they have lots of light, and they seem to be doing okay. Another species that I had an opportunity of getting was American chestnuts. And I planted 50 of them, and I think I got about 20 of them left growing. So it takes a little bit more for them. I don't know, might be out of their zone just a little bit, but they're a nice, beautiful tree. So yeah, we have been doing some of that. And
I'd love to get a chestnut.
Yeah,
I would love to get some.
you would you? Okay.
Yes, I would.
Oddly enough, apparently, I guess there's female and male trees. And when I think I've got certain trees with scary nuts, but I haven't been able to pick up any viable ones. So if to maybe,
You have one in your front yard, don't you?
yeah, I do.
I saw that in the video. It's a great tree.
Yeah, so that happens to be one which has nuts on them every year, but none of them are growing. I've picked them up and I can't get anything to grow.
Hello, it's Melanie here. Where did you get your American chestnut sourced from? A nursery? A forester?
Yeah, it was the Soil and Crop Improvement Association, which had a program back in the 90s. And they were looking for people to plant them. And so I got 50 trees from them.
I'm in Beaverton with 100 acres. I live in Toronto, and my forester said I could get some American chestnut in my area. And so I was just curious, and interested, and I'm appreciative of your success.
Yeah.
But my forester said he could sell me trees for $100, and I'm not happy if the deer come in and just chop off a tree that I planted for $100.
That's right. Yeah, definitely not.
I don't know how big the tree is, but that's a future project for me. Thank you.
So
I only,
get
I
in
got
touch
two.
with the Soil and Crop Improvement Association in Guelph and see if they can direct you. I'm pretty sure that you can get them in Simcoe.
Okay,
Yeah, I think in Simcoe on the experimental farm just east of Simcoe. They're growing them there. And you can also get them from a nursery in by Niagara Falls.
Remo?
Yeah.
Remo?
Yes, it is.
I've
Yeah.
got two American chestnut. Soil and Crop didn't have any for me. I've got a lot of horse chestnut. I've picked them up, okay, in Paris, in Kew Gardens, in Niagara Falls, and in Cold Springs. And I think every one of them a percentage grew. Difficulty is I got them transplanted so many times, I can't tell you which one came from.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I've planted some of them too. I got a couple of them going. They didn't do very well the first 10 years. And then all of a sudden they took off. And now they're growing really good. So, yeah.
But we need a few more species. We keep losing one every few years. I mean, maybe we can get the American chestnut back. It was a wonderful wood.
It would be great to have some kind of OWA seed share. If there's folks that know about seed collecting and, you know, have the time, it would be awesome because basically you could just mail them to your neighbors and get them to reimburse you for the shipping cost, but be a nice little ad hoc group.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Absolutely.
But go into that next month for walnuts. I use squirrels.
Well, they do a good job. The only thing I'd say about, I'll go back to my walnuts. My walnuts all came from a man named Andy Dixon up at Elsie Craig. And he had done he had been measuring the growth rate for about 60 different trees at his property. And he brought me grain bags of nuts from the fastest growing tree. And at the time, thought that might be an okay idea. I really do believe that today, if I'd have got the nuts that I planted from a couple of trees in Colborne, Ontario, which is only 8 miles from me, I guess, I might have done better. I really don't think it's much of an idea to import your genetic material for this. Much better to save seed from a superior species, a specimen that's right near you.
Mm-hmm.
To quite an extent, that works for livestock too. Some guy from Alabama goes to Montana and buys the bull that won the competition. He takes him down south and he's no damn good at all. You know, it's like hiring Eskimos to work in Florida. They aren't going to thrive.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's a good tip.
Works for me.
Right. So what about biological control? Be afraid that sometimes it gets out of hand and that we might solve one problem but create another one?
Oh, I think we pretty much always do that, George.
Yeah. So,
but
we got bugs running around now that I've never seen before. They kind of, some of them, those little stink bugs, they like to come into the house and live with you.
Oh, yeah, but come on, George, this is living with nature.
Yeah, I know.
The thing is that, okay, if you've got some cobwebs in your house, your wife will probably go nuts, but that's the natural way to control flies.
Okay.
The cobwebs, you know, the spiders do a good job on that.
I'll pass that on to Ali.
Well, yeah, but the difficulty is that we would much rather spray with a pesticide. That smells good.
Yeah,
I don't know.
we, we did a little experiment last fall because last year we had so many gypsy moth, we had so many egg masses on the trees that, yeah. So, well, we got to do something. And apparently you can spray those egg masses and kill a lot of them. So I thought,
So what do
well,
you spray the egg mass with? I haven't done that.
okay, well, you use vegetable oil, about 50,
Vegetable oil, oh,
and with a little bit of soap and about 50% vegetable oil and water, and put a little soap in with it.
okay, I think, yeah, I could see that doing
And,
damage to the egg masses.
that's supposed to seal them off and choke them out. So we did that on quite a few trees. Then this spring, I thought, well, I'd like to see if that actually worked or not. So I went and collected some of the ones that I sprayed, and I collected some of the ones that I didn't spray. We put them in a little container, put them in the sunroom, and in a couple of weeks, they weren't doing a whole lot. So we thought we'd cut a little hole in the top and give them some air. Well, lo and behold, those ones that, that weren't sprayed, they came out with a vengeance. And they were all over the room.
Oh, no.
So, but it did work well. And I would highly recommend that anybody who's afraid of the gypsy moths being a problem for them next year, that they do the egg masses, because you can sure thin out the population.
Just soap and vegetable oil, okay,
Yeah.
okay.
Just ask your grandchildren, say you have a wonderful, fun day planned for them. And
Yeah, Spray.
get some ladders,
Yes. Yeah.
maybe a week planned, actually.
I think so. So anyway, but I think up here anyway, I'm pretty sure that we will not get any gypsy moth next year, because I don't see very many egg masses. So I think they've run their cycle.
How far up the tree are the egg masses? Because I'm not seeing them. Maybe I just haven't been looking up high enough. I don't know.
Oh no, they're usually on the bottom of the trunks.
Okay.
Yeah, I would have said they're usually, the lower part of the tree.
Yeah.
I'm near Ottawa, so I don't know if we just haven't really had as much. I know certain sections of the city got it, but right around here, we didn't seem to be affected too badly at all.
Okay.
Maybe next year, though, will be the year. I don't know.
Right.
I can't help but comment here. George, you've been planting a bunch of trees, and I've planted some, but over our lifetime, there's been a whole bunch of species that have just disappeared.
That's for sure.
And it causes me to have great difficulty getting truly optimistic about forestry into the future. There's almost more species have disappeared than we have today. And then some of the ones, the main one that we planted in large quantities, so-called Scots pine. Yeah. Who's laughing?
I am.
What's funny? What's funny?
They're ugly.
Well, they're ugly, but they're really black forest pine. And as soon as the Germans found out we wanted seed, they figured there was a chance to get back at us for beating up on them in a couple of wars. It's just sick. They seem to grow decent trees in Scotland. Not impressive logs, but sawmills seem to be running on them. But has anybody found a use other than a Christmas tree? You've got 50 acres of Scots pine that's too big to be a Christmas tree. The only thing you can do is hope for a forest fire.
That's right.
That's not very, given the effort and expense that somebody went to plant those things.
Well, I guess that's pretty well gone now because I don't think anyone will plant Scots pine anymore.
Oh, yeah, but there's still a lot of them out there.
Yeah, I've got a lot of them.
And they've adapted. The seed will spread and grow like crazy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're quite invasive.
They're quite invasive and they've naturalized. I don't know.
Oh,
Yeah, they can take over. And when we moved out here, the previous owner told us that there were only two kind of pines that he didn't like. One was Scots pine and the other were porcupines.
Oh, okay.
And I can attest to
Well,
that.
he's-
And my dogs can too.
Boy, David.
yeah.
Does anybody else have any further questions, or is there anything we didn't touch on? We're probably 5 minutes from the end here, so I just want to make sure that everyone gets a chance to ask.
Well, I'm not sure who got this started, but I say kudos and kudos to George. He seems to be a central figure in all this. It's a super effort.
Yeah, it
Well
was
done.
really lovely.
I wish some of the rest of you had done more talking. You make me feel greedy.
Well, it's a nice chance to get together, and especially from all across the province. Is anyone here from, like North Bay or Algoma chapter?
No,
No. Yeah, because they're so far from, they're 5 hours from, or eight hours or something like that from North Bay, that finally with this virtual world we can kind of share ideas and experiences. So
Okay, I'll throw in another optimistic comment because I've been kind of pessimistic. I know a man who, when he was, I think, teaching in Sault Ste. Marie, he bought 100 acres on St. Joe's Island, and it was almost entirely growing up to basswood. And he soon discovered that there really wasn't much market for basswood. Like basically, he thought he had a bunch of good-sized trees that should be harvested, and all he could get was loggers to laugh at him. Who wants basswood? And then the Japanese came along, and they love white wood, and he'd given up on selling any of this basswood. He gets a phone call from Sault Ste. Marie that somebody researched the thing, and suddenly, bazoom, he's got all kinds of money. They want to throw at him for this basswood that, like, for 25 years, he thought it was useless. So, one day.
sure.
I like that. Yeah, there's always some use, and with the research now that's happening at U of T and other places related to the bioeconomy and resins and all the rest, there certainly will be uses for all types of wood. So
This spring, I sold 2,000 feet of basswood to a furniture company.
Oh,
To use
Wow.
a second,
A1.
to use a secondary wood.
Yeah, well, they love it for the framework for less expensive kitchen cupboards. It's the preferred wood. There's a local market for a few logs, but
And for some reason, for mantelpieces.
that one eludes me.
Yep, that was
I
really,
could get you- I could
that's
get you-
really unusual, but they were wanting to put basswood mantelpieces into a suburb in Carleton Place.
Okay. I would much prefer, oak or maple or cherry, even that tamarack that somebody was talking about. Make a more interesting mantle from my mind, but then I
Well,
have a
apparently
fireplace without a man.
Apparently they peel the bark off it and they like the lumps underneath.
Okay.
all right, well, who's volunteering to host our Forestry for Aggies course? Joe, you're certainly on the hook.
Oh, well, I can talk almost anytime.
All
like a
right,
nap.
well,
I like a nap after lunch.
okay. Well,
Come
you're
and
gonna
see
be,
me.
you're,
Come
yeah,
and
you're
see
gonna,
me. We haven't
okay.
covered our whole topic yet. I'm into pasture. I'm into rotational grazing. It's only day before yesterday that my cows stopped getting fresh grass every day. And they like that, you know.
Well, I've written your name down. You're on now, so,
Well, George will put you in touch with me if you can.
okay, wonderful. I'm looking forward to it. Be some good ideas shared. But this was really wonderful. Thank you, everybody, for coming, and thank you, George. And I'm sure there's more questions and thoughts that are going to come from this. So I'll reach out to everyone with some of the details, like the soil and crop, and the Forest Gene Conservation Association, which is, you know, who's looking after the butternuts, and
Okay.
Glenn's contact for the FSC program, and Kathleen as well for the biocontrol of the dog strangling vine. So you'll get an email from me tomorrow and the recording, so you can share that to some of your friends who maybe missed this. Everyone who registered will get the recording. So there's, you know, 20 plus more people that didn't come tonight that will also get the recording. So
Good.
So thank you guys so much. And we'll see you next month for a walk and talk, a question and answer about Rod's property, and we'll probably talk a lot more about walnuts and squirrels, eh, Rod?
Yes, that's quite probable.
This is great. So if you have any more questions, just email me and I'll put you in touch with George for those that don't already have his contact. And otherwise, I'll let George go have a rest now.
Well, that's been fun anyway. So thanks for joining us.
Thanks,
done,
everyone.
Thanks for asking us.
Have a good night.
Good night.
Goodbye.
Good, everyone.
Thank you.